Western Hemisphere. So that's just about enough books to fit into one of our modern day public libraries. 50 years later, and it's the turn of the century, and there are several million books, too many to count. Just kind of goes to show the astronomical increase in production that this had over top of the old style, which was, of course, by hand. Now, I always struggle to think of a good modern-day parallel to the press. The best I can think of is something like the internet, just in terms of availability of information to a broad audience of people at a relatively cheap cost. Now, that being said, modern scholars consider this to be the most significant human innovation of all time. To me, the thing that kind of puts it over the edge is that it took mankind out of an artisan age and into a manufacturing age. So before the press, people were using tools, really, to make things. But now with the press, this is kind of realizing Gutenberg's vision that a machine can do what a human can do, only much, much faster. It sounds kind of intuitive and maybe even obvious by our modern day mentality, but nobody was thinking like that back then. Now, there are two things that I like to mention before getting kind of into the meat of everything. The first thing is that Gutenberg didn't actually invent printing in general. Printing had been around for over 1,000 years before Gutenberg. It was invented in China and Korea, actually. What he did kind of innovate, though, is a movable typeset. So before, when printing was first around, well, very early on, you'd have to carve a wooden block, but eventually cast a metal plate, and then you'd use that kind of like a giant stamp. The big drawback to that is every time you want to print something different, you'd have to recast a whole new plate. Not exactly practical, really. With movable type, though, you sidestep that issue. Every time you want a new page, you just rearrange the letters. Much simpler and faster that way. Now, the second thing is that this is a replica. Shocker. The original was destroyed in the early 1500s in a peasant's revolt. Now, there are no surviving fragments, not even any pictures or blueprints of what the press looked like. So what it does look like is up to speculation. Now, that being said, the historians are confident that it was modeled after a wine press. And so this is almost exactly what one looked like from Gutenberg's time. Kind of a handful of minor differences. The biggest of which is that instead of this plank here, there'd be a trough to collect the juice. Now, just a quick word on Gutenberg's life leading up to the press. He was born in Mainz, Germany, and then moved to Strasbourg around the age of 30. Now, that's where he completed the press itself. And when he did finish the press, he actually didn't go straight into printing Bibles, although that was definitely at the forefront of his mind. But he started just with one-page pamphlets, even a small Latin grammar textbook, just trying to work out the kinks so he could make the process smooth for when he ended up printing Bibles. And the version of the Bible that he ended up printing is called the Latin Vulgate, also called the Biblia Sacra. Now, that version of the Bible kind of set the precedent in a lot of ways for versions to come. It was commissioned to be made way back in 380 AD by Pope Damascus. Now, Damascus wanted a standardized Latin translation of the Bible, and he had a fellow named Jerome format it, I guess you could say. And again, a lot of the hallmarks that we're accustomed to spawned from that version, right down to the order that we read the books in, starting with Genesis and so on. All the books existed back then, of course, but there actually was not a standard order in which to read them yet. He even came up with our modern-day chapter divisions, all the way down to the double-column text. None of those things were around until Jerome completed his work, but they all still persist today. Okay, let's get started then. So, the first step of the process is to set the metal type. Now, that was the longest portion of the process. I mean, not only are these letters very tiny, but then you have to put them all in place backwards. Very arduous and time-consuming. And so naturally, Gutenberg had his apprentices do that. Now, once the type is set, you have to ink the plate. And in Gutenberg's day, they would use these ink balls. Sort of smear the ink evenly across the ball, and then tamp it down onto the plate. Now, using these was kind of an art form unto itself. It took years to master. I've been doing this for a few months, so I'm going to skip these. instead use a roller. Now, the ink itself was Gutenberg's own concoction. The ink at the time was optimized for a quill. And as it turns out, that was too thin, too watery to work for the press. So we had to come up with something a little bit thicker. Once the plate is inked, you have to set the paper. And the paper is held in place with this wooden frame called a frisket. This just ensures that the paper doesn't move during the process and then smear and ultimately ruin the whole page. Place the frisket on top of the casket here. Slide the casket underneath the platen. And then give the lever a turn. A few seconds later, so as you could see, this only took a few seconds really to make. Just for some comparison, it would take a scribe by hand 2 days to make the same page. Now, we don't know exactly how long it took Gutenberg to make a singular entire Bible, but we do know that over the course of 2 years, he made 180 Bibles. So again, for comparison, it would take a scribe by hand 2 years, and they would make only one. We really cannot be stressed enough how much faster this was. Now, just as a quick bookend to Gutenberg's time with the press, he did have to take out a sizable loan in order to make it. And he took the loan from a fellow named Johann Fust. So he completed the press in 1450, 1455, rolls along, and now Fust is looking to collect on the debt. Gutenberg owed the modern day equivalent of 527,000 US dollars. Gutenberg can't come up with that kind of money, and so Fust sued Gutenberg in Archbishop's Court, and Fust won. So he then collected all of Gutenberg's assets, including the press itself. Kind of a sad ending to an otherwise really interesting historical story. That being said, historians don't really think about Fust very often, but everybody knows about the Gutenberg press. If you guys have any questions, feel free to stick around and ask. But otherwise, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.